quarantined and love to talk to people in different parts of the country. So Seattle's been hit, but I think New York has obviously surpassed us in numbers, because especially being in New York, downtown Manhattan, you have so many people on top of each other. So definitely want to go into that. But for the people who are listening, your friends and family, hello from Kyle and myself, and for your mom, I'm sure mom's out there listening, but we'll give her a shout out too. So Kyle, why don't you let everyone know who are your friends or people just meeting you for the first time. Give them a little background of yourself, where you grew up, and just how you got to where you are now.
For sure. So I grew up in Redmond, Washington, was born in Seattle, but grew up in Redmond. And for anybody who's not familiar, it's a suburb outside of Seattle. You think of it as the headquarters of Microsoft is there. I think it's the big claim to fame. Had a great time throughout high school, and ended up going to the University of Washington. Spent 4 years there, and then after graduation, spent a quick internship the summer after that over in Washington, D.C., working for Senator Dick Lugar and the Foreign Relations Committee, just to see if I wanted to get into public life. Decided not to go that route, and so moved back to Seattle, and went to work for a large supply chain and logistics company. After a handful of years there, as most jobs out of college, or I guess as many jobs out of college, I wasn't really doing what I thought that I wanted to be doing. It was a lot of kind of like manual data entry, things like that. And really kind of wanted to like pivot my life into something that was exciting and new. And around that time is when I was first introduced to you. And we chatted about some stuff around goals and kind of, what I wanted to do next. It was right around that time as well that I actually ended up going to Las Vegas to an electronic music festival and ended up meeting the woman who would become my wife. So met her in Vegas. We did a long distance relationship for I think about 6 months. And after that, I said, she was living in New York at the time. I said, hey, I've always wanted to live in New York. This thing that we have going is great. So I quit my job in Seattle and moved out to New York without a job, with just kind of confidence that I would be able to pound the pavement and get a job doing something. And so I moved in with my then girlfriend, now wife, and her 3 other roommates. So there was 5 of us in a 3-bedroom apartment.
Wow.
And yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience. In those early days, a lot of the advice that you had given me kind of, get out there, do some things in the city, get comfortable. And what that led me to do was I actually had a job offer from a company that was like selling off domain names. So it was like .book or something like that. And while they were processing my background check, I actually had reached out to a buddy of mine from who I used to play basketball with in junior high and high school. And he was one of the early guys who got into the Uber team in New York City. And Uber had really kind of like changed my life in Seattle. So, the public transportation system in Seattle is not fantastic for everybody who's lived there. And so your only options are kind of like taking the bus. And then the cab system at that time, like you'd call them, they would show up, they might not show up. And so when Uber came around, it was super reliable. At that time, it was like only black cars. So you felt like super fancy when you were going out. But that like really revolutionized the way that I got around my city. And, it was one of those things that I said, I would always love to work there. And like, it was one of those companies that I was really trying to look at. So ended up reaching out to him. He said, hey, we need a couple volunteers that are willing to go out for $25 an hour and kind of educate the taxi drivers on what this Uber thing is. And so I didn't have a job at the time. So I was like, $25 an hour sounds great to me. And really kind of just like took that jump. And so doing whatever I could to help the company. And so I went out in like the 90-degree heat in the LaGuardia taxi pens where it's like, hundreds of taxi drivers lined up and legitimately just walked down the aisle handing out palm cards, talking about Uber educating these guys on what it was, and trying to get them to come back to the office to sign up with an account. And so I did that for about a week. The next week, they asked me to stay in the office and help folks sign up on the actual computer itself, set up their accounts. And I ended up sitting next to the guy who had then become my boss. And so after a week of that, so just 2 weeks of kind of doing that kind of thing, I asked them if they had any full-time positions. At that time, the interview process was was far less rigorous than it is now. But ended up just interviewing with the general manager one time. And funny story about my interview, the general manager, one of his questions was, teach me something that you know about or that I might not know. And I just watched a video on a guy who had taught somebody how to iron a shirt. And I ironed my shirts like from junior high all throughout high school, in college, all that kind of stuff. And so I legitimately was wearing a button-up shirt. What's that? Yeah. You had to, yeah. Too much ironing. But I legitimately took the shirt off of my back in the interview and instructed him how to iron a shirt. And he was saying afterwards, after I got the job, he was saying, typically I get, guys in finance will talk to me about how to trade X, Y, or Z, like, financial security. So it was kind of a breath of fresh air, but yeah, so that kind of started me on the last 7 years of my life. Over those 7 years working at Uber. So when I got in, I was the 250th employee. So the company was really small. We were in a small office in Long Island City, Queens. And then we built the business, right? Like I was involved in originally starting the taxi product. One of the big things that I was super interested in is launching the product in other places. So I ended up me and two other guys launched Uber in New Jersey, launched it in Connecticut. We built those kind of, I guess, states up until they got their own teams. I then launched Uber in upstate New York. I launched Uber in kind of the New York City suburbs. So think of like the Hamptons and areas like that. And then had my first kid. And so after that, I went on to manage the New York City market for a year as the marketplace health. And then we was looking for something to get back to kind of that like hustle roots. And that was right around the time that they were launching Jump. So Uber had purchased Jump. And for those folks that don't know, it's an electric micro mobility company. So the electric scooters, the electric bikes. And they were launching a program here in New York. So I applied to that. And then over the last year ran the operations for that here in New York City. And it was definitely back to basics. It was in a van picking them bikes up in the Bronx, at 2 a.m. and, learning tons of new stuff and applying a lot of learnings from the Uber business to the Jump business. And then we just had our second child in December. And was on paternity leave when this craziness all started. And so it's definitely been an interesting transition. I feel like I was kind of already a little bit on home quarantine per se, but obviously had far more freedoms. But yeah, it's been interesting since then, the changes and kind of just everything that's going on.
Okay. No, that sounds great. It's I think a lot of people are familiar with Uber, but not as many with Jump. I know in California, the first time I saw like electric scooters out, I know Seattle's starting to do them with the bikes, that's becoming a big deal. So no, that's great. I want a lot of people to understand who are listening. We have friends and family, but maybe for some other people who are looking out there, might have lost their job. As we know, probably about 55-60% of America is in the service industry. So it could be restaurants, hotels, airlines. There's so many people that might be out of work. And I don't want to gloss over two things that really made you who you are today. Mm-hmm. And one of them is networking. We all have a lot of different people that we can reach out to. So it doesn't matter if it's high school, college, trade school, you have a network. So if you're out of work, network with people. I know you and I met through your mother. Your mom and I and my sister are actually playing the Bellevue Club tennis, and that's how we got brought together. But it's really for people who are looking for jobs or looking for a different job, really hit your network hard from your family, your friends, your community. And you know what? Be vulnerable and be open, saying, this is what I'm looking for. And do you know of anyone? So I think networking is a huge thing. And so I don't want to gloss over that. So a lot of people really highlight that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is, I don't think you give yourself enough credit. It's your hustle. You know, it's kind of like swallow your ego, do whatever you have to. This doesn't define me. Your first day, your first week, your first month, even year, it doesn't matter if you're a first-time lawyer or a first-time, chef. You might be scrubbing dishes, but it's where you ultimately want to get to. So not where you are today, but where you want to get to. And I think, like you said, you woke up at 2 a.m, you did whatever was needed. And especially Uber being a younger company, it was kind of like, let's make it up as we go. But instead of putting your head in the sand or just waiting for direction, you kind of took that. And I think those are 2 huge skills that I want to highlight for everyone, but really understand networking and hustle and putting your ego aside is going to help you get a leg up.
Yeah. And I think that especially right now, I think that there was something, I was listening to something the other day, and it's almost like, I know I personally have been connecting with a bunch of people that even just because, everybody's not able to talk to the people that they normally talk to, it does this, you can see this whole social isolate or the social distancing or quarantine or isolation as kind of an opportunity to reach out to those folks that you haven't talked to in a long time and rebuild those connections and talk to them about what's going on in their lives. And, an opportunity to do that, this is a perfect opportunity to do that, especially if, you've lost your job or you're looking for work or anything like that. I think that most people out there right now are looking to help other people, especially right now. I think in general, that's probably true, but especially right now. And so, just kind of taking the step to reach out to those folks who, are who you think might be able to help you out or you just do want to reconnect with, is definitely super important. And something that I think that people all across the country and around the world right now are doing. Like I know I set up a Friday Zoom meeting with a bunch of buddies from high school. And, we would get together every time I would be back in Seattle, but we wouldn't see each other or talk every week. But now we do every single week, which is fantastic.
No, that's a great highlight also, just because the reason I put this together was just to, as you said, I have time and to go out there. I wasn't trying to set a conversation up earlier, but when this happened, I was like, you know what, you do have the time, let's reach out. I love doing this because I reach out to people that I know as old friends or acquaintances, but also I get to learn so much. And I think what can happen is instead of one person just talk like myself, and I send things out to a lot of my clients, past and present, but they get to hear from so many other people that are different ages or different phases of life, live in different parts of the country. So if they don't see something or hear something from me, maybe it's you, or maybe I had someone from healthcare on, or somebody who's a college basketball player. Somebody different can hopefully give them or spur them on enough to get into motion. So I think that's great. So the hustle, the networking, and just putting yourself out there. So I think there's a lot of people, you need to be aware of taking time away from people. So don't interrupt them during certain hours. But if you're a professional and you DM them or reach them through LinkedIn or through a friend that gives you an introduction, I think, like you said, a lot of people will be available to talk to you for 5, 10, 15 minutes. But when you do talk to them, be very clear and concise of what you need. And also, if you're asking something of them, also be very clear of the value benefit that you could bring to them. So if you're asking for a job, ask them specifically what you're looking for, what you need, and the value benefit of why you'd be a good match for that company. Don't just ask people, hey, can you help me out? And just leave it at that. So,
right. Yeah. And I was willing to go out in the taxi pens and sling Palm cards. A guy that we hired who ended up being one of the best people that we hired at the company was offered to work for free for the first X number of months. And when we didn't even ask him to, I don't think, he was living in Dallas. He flew to New York to do an in-person interview and just said, hey, I'm going to be in New York during this time. Would love to come by and talk to your team. So it's things like that, you got to be, or that show that you are super committed to making something happen as well.
Okay. So I just want to take a second and look at some of the comments out here. I saw your mom was on. Ted's loving the beard, and there's some other people out there that are giving you some love. So definitely wanted to say hi to everyone that's listening in. The
Nice.
next thing I just want to talk about is, I think, obviously what's going on. I've highlighted Seattle of how we're dealing with this, and New York being the epicenter truly for the U.S. having the highest number of people that have caught the disease, and people sadly have passed away from it. But what are you seeing in New York? Obviously, I've seen pictures of the subways and downtowns are desolate, but what are you seeing? What's the sense? What's the vibe, for yourself? And what are you hearing not only from your company, but maybe your mayor or your governor?
Yeah. So, I think like most of the country, I think that the first time that we really heard about coronavirus being serious, we were actually up on a ski trip in Vermont. And we were, we have friends that are getting married out here in Connecticut in June, and his wife is from China. And so we were saying, oh, well, maybe maybe her parents won't be able to come. But obviously we weren't thinking that, maybe the wedding or something like that would have to be postponed. So yeah, we from pretty early on, right about the time, that the New York mayor and the New York governor issued stay-at-home orders, the Connecticut and Jersey mayors all kind of signed on as well. And so, pretty much right out the gate, everyone was, the streets were empty. And that was kind of the first thing that was interesting was, with two kids, if I was like a single person or without kids, I wouldn't necessarily have to go outside all the time, or not all the time, but like have to go outside for an hour, 2 hours or something like that. Obviously you'd like to take a walk or run or something like that, but with little kids in a 2-bedroom apartment, you kind of just like have to get outside. And so originally the time that I would spend outside would be at the parks, and so we would go to the park and we would, stay 6 feet away. But I did notice that, there was a decent number of people there. And then especially kind of down by the water, on one of the nice days, there was a ton of people running and walking, which obviously, as long as they stay distant from each other, is okay. But there was like a piece of grass that people were kind of hanging out on. And again, it was all people like 6 to 10 feet apart. They weren't really close to each other, but I'm sure that the Hoboken mayor really essentially said, we don't even want to try to continue to enforce that. So they just really barricaded off all the green space, all the parks, which previously were just the playgrounds were closed. Now like the entire park is closed. And so for me and the kids, if I do want to take my 2.5-year-old out to walk or run, there's an overpass down by me that is covered and has like some open concrete space. But like the area that we currently live is a bunch of families. And so every time we go over there, there's also at least one other family there. So trying to stay distant. And I think that that's one of the most challenging parts is trying to, my 2-year-old obviously doesn't understand that he has to stay away from the other kids or like anything like that. So that's pretty challenging. But overall, it's everybody's taking it super seriously. I think everybody's trying to support the local businesses. I have a former colleague who has sent out a bunch of resources on how to volunteer, whether it's sending money to the food bank or just a whole handful of things. So he's trying to get people connected into exactly what they can do to give back. And then I have a friend who's a doctor in northern New Jersey, he was just kind of giving me the lowdown of like, how as things were ramping up, kind of how crazy it was getting. So yeah, I think in general, people are taking it very seriously. It's the area outside, it's kind of gotten nice and it's springtime. And so there's like, beautiful blossoms on the trees and things like that through Hoboken. And so you can get, if you're out on a run or something like that, you can get some pretty incredible pictures just because there's nobody else out there. But yeah, we don't spend much time outside. We try and stay inside as much as we can and get the kids out for like an hour.
Now, for the people who don't know or maybe haven't, because I think a lot of us are shutting off the news or probably checking in once a day because you hear so many of these stories, and depending on what the news is putting out there, it's just kind of, it's negative sometimes. What have you seen or heard about Central Park? They're setting up hospitals there, correct?
Yeah, I've heard that. I have not been in to see that. Have stayed pretty close to home. I have seen the hospital ship that's right in the river. But yeah, and the Javits Center is right kind of near where I am. But yeah, I saw that the other day that somebody said that they were putting up kind of temporary hospitals there. And obviously the two that are kind of here on the river over on the west side.
Okay. And how are you guys dealing with kids K through 12? I know in Seattle or in Washington, they kind of just said, you know what, we're going to cancel the rest of the year. We'll see you in the fall. Obviously, they're doing stuff online for college, maybe some high school, but essentially there's not going to be an in-person school for the rest of the year here.
Yeah, it's still TBD from my understanding. We have a couple of young nieces and nephews upstate New York, and they originally, I think that they were going to say that they were going to come back, I think, in early May. And at this point, they've kind of exhausted all the vacation time and a couple other things. So like they had a little bit of a buffer there, but apparently now, they are trying to. And so originally it was the teachers were kind of just saying, just review the things that you were already doing. But now I think they're trying to get back into like active teaching via Zoom and things like that. But no official word yet as to like school closures across the state.
Okay. So what is Uber? What is the message that leadership is sending out, and what's going on? I take Uber, Lyft, all the different rideshare programs. When I travel, obviously haven't been doing that. So I know Uber Eats, I know some other programs are out there, but are people still taking ride sharing programs? And if so, has there been a new ordinance put on to the drivers just to let the passengers know what's going on?
Yeah, I think I've been a little bit unplugged because I've been on paternity leave, but I do know that what the company has done so far. So the first thing that they did, from my understanding, is provide the drivers with hand sanitizer, things like that for them to use in the vehicles. Super strong messaging around how to keep their vehicles clean, how to keep themselves safe. Trying to make sure that if they do feel that they don't feel comfortable on the road, that they should stay off the road. I think that there are still rides happening because people still do need to get to A, B, and C, whether that's the doctor and they don't have a car, especially in New York, and can't take public transportation or something like that. So people are still using the service. I think that obviously there's a drastic decrease in the amount of business that has been out there. And so as a result, the company really has pushed or has provided drivers with the ability to sign up to deliver food through Uber Eats. So the nice thing about the company is that although the rides business did see a decrease, the food delivery business, obviously right now, as people are going out probably less and less to the grocery store, is still a big business. So and then I just saw I think it was yesterday or the day before that they partnered with a bunch of different companies that are like actively hiring right now. So like your Domino's, those kinds of companies who like during this crazy time are actually like they can't hire enough people to get in the door. And so I think that the company is trying to do as good of a job as they can to make sure that they provide those people with as many options as possible, because if somebody was relying strictly on the ride sharing business, it's obviously taken a significant hit.
And I'm seeing a lot of places in Seattle, especially grocery stores, stocking shelves, Amazon to fulfill orders. There are a lot of people out there hiring. Obviously, if you don't want the connection where you're working close, that's going to be hard for some people. They're being aware of staying 6 feet apart, but there are some jobs out there. Obviously, a lot of people looking for home. I think there's going to be some silver lining. I think a lot of businesses are going to figure out, you know what, we can have people work from home and just be as productive. And I think that's going to the commercial space. I think that's going to get hit because people are going to realize we don't need as much space. And I kind of wonder, you know, living in Bellevue, look at Bellevue Square. You know, Nordstrom's, how big is that space? 2 stories, you know, a couple 100,000 square feet, and they might be paying $50,000 to $100,000 a month, and their online business is doing bonkers. So it's like, why have a brick and mortar? So I wonder if some malls and some smaller places are just going to go the wayside because we're going to understand the new now is we can work from home, be as productive, and save money in certain areas.
Yeah, and possibly switch to things like some of those new, a handful of new companies, whether it's a clothing company or a company like, you know, a lot of the mattress companies now that are pretty much just direct to consumer will just have a showroom where you can go in and see some of the products and then order the vast majority of what you have there online. So yeah, it'll be interesting for sure. It'll also be interesting to see if people continue with a higher level of food delivery or whether they go back to grocery stores. But that's an issue that we're seeing here, right? Like, you know, we have food delivery is great. There's a ton of options near us. But trying to get to the grocery store is actually a pretty significant challenge
You have
because
bodegas open?
like a thing like Trader Joe's, for example, like the bodegas are open, but even like a Trader Joe's, you know, they're taking all the correct precautions, right? So they're only allowing a certain number of people into the store. The automatic doors are closed, so they have somebody at the front that will, as you walk, they will open the doors for you when somebody else leaves. They will put hand sanitizer in your hand. They'll wipe down the cart before you even touch it, and then you go into the store. But because there's that like extra attention to that, the lines, and because there's the 6 feet of distancing, we have Trader Joe's that's like a, you know, stone's throw. It's like a couple blocks down, but the line to that Trader Joe's was almost at our apartment the other day.
Wow.
So you know, you have to kind of just bank a couple hours just to stand in line potentially to get your groceries. And the alternative being like you could get groceries delivered, but there's no real delivery times right now, at least within like a week. So
Well, I will tell you this, at least from my experience, and it's harder if you have children and you have to be on a certain time frame, but I went to Costco once and I went to just a Rite Aid. And the things that I do is I try to do it within the last hour because a lot of older individuals, they're like in Washington, we have set hours between like 7 and 9 for older individuals to go. And then a lot of younger families with kids are going to want to go. But after, you know, dinner time, most people are going to sit and down. So I found, you know, going to Costco, going to Rite Aid, you know, it's 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. I was in and out, no one's there. And Costco was doing the same thing. They have someone wiping down every single cart. So they take the dirty carts, they wipe everything down with sanitizer, wipe everything off from the push rails to the inside. And then they have kind of the clean bins section. So they're handing out the clean bins. I've been to a couple stores, they all have tape on the floor. So everyone's standing 6 feet apart. So it's interesting how people are adapting to it. I think in life, you're going to see knuckleheads. I still see, you know, people who did Mardi Gras, people are going to spring break. It's getting nice. I was driving to work. Green Lake was packed. Golden Gardens was packed. But for the most part, I think people are adhering to this and understanding this is not only a threat to your health, but it's also a threat to the economic boom. So if we drag this on another 2-3 months, you know, this is really going to hurt the hotels, the airlines, you know, professional sports, the entertainment industry. They're all getting hit. Well,
Oh, now you're back.
okay. So I was just saying a bunch of bad things about you, so we don't need to go over that. I was actually just thinking, I kind of knew it, but I just put two and two together. When we first met, Dara was our CEO and president, and now he's your CEO and president, moved over to Uber. So
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
So a lot of things, I just want to know what's going on new in your life, what it's like for your job and everything else has changed, but also just some fun things and just to kind of shout out. So maybe just educate us. So any new Netflix that you would recommend, or what's your kind of series you in right now? Or is it different having kids? You're doing Tubatellis and all that.
Yeah. A lot of Disney Plus in the house. But yeah, I've been trying to read a bunch. But one series on Netflix, if you haven't watched it, I think that the 4th season is coming out soon. But The Last Kingdom is something that I would really recommend. It's about the Vikings. It's like historical fiction in that like the Vikings invade England and are kind of in the process of taking over the island. And it uses historical events and things like that. So it's cool that way, and I'm into that. But the story's great, the characters are great, the costuming's fantastic. And would definitely recommend people catching up on that until they get to the new season. Watch The Witcher. I thought that was pretty good.
I haven't heard that. What is that?
It's based off of some, I believe, again, like fiction novels. And it's a fantasy show, but if you're into like Game of Thrones and things like that, it would be a good watch. It's a little hard to follow, and I actually had to turn on subtitles, even though it's in English to follow along. But it's got some magic. It's got some creatures and things like that. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, other than that, just trying to. I started. My brother recommended the Formula One Drive to Survive, I think is the name of it. So I watched a couple episodes of that, and I thought that was very well done. But yeah, trying to like for us with the kids, it's like trying to whenever you can carve out time, trying to do some things that are like relatively productive is my kind of like MO right now.
Okay. So we talked about yourself and your kids. How's your better half doing? What is happening with her job, and how is she dealing with this?
She's doing really well. She actually went back. So she's back at work actually right now, like full time doing. It's all remote work online. But she's managing a team, I think, of now like 10 plus people, and is super busy. She works in finance, and they're actually far busy, or they said that like the business is actually busier now than it had been in the past. So she's really come back from maternity leave and hit the ground running. And thankfully I'm still on paternity leave for another week or so. And so I can kind of pick up the slack there. And so she's typically in here taking calls, running the business. And then I am, doing lunches, bottles, and putting the kids down for nap time, taking them out for walks and things like that. But she's been great so far. But very busy, especially coming off of maternity leave.
Okay. So I'm looking at our Facebook Live at some of the comments, and I'm taking a wild guess. This is family or friends who are asking. I have one person that is Amy, and she's asking, can we see the kids?
Oh, yeah.
I'm guessing they're asleep, so you don't want to do that. So
yeah, it might open another can of worms.
Okay. So anything else that you want to kind of say, or anything that, like you said, you're on paternity leave for another week. Are you going to go back? What is the plan? Have you talked to your leadership, what you're doing after that?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm on paternity leave right now. I think the big thing for me, before this whole thing happened, I was in this like incredible state where my son was in daycare, we had a baby, and I was at home. I didn't have to be, working. And so I was really like doing a lot of the things that I wanted to do, right? So I was taking online courses, I was reading a whole bunch, I was working out at the gym every single day. And so, you know, it was just like kind of in this like super productive stage. And once this hit, and I think that like a lot of people probably had this, like, you know, it threw everything off, right? Like, that entire thing was thrown off. My son, you know, isn't at daycare anymore. So we're watching him. And so trying to figure out how to restructure my days was something that was super important early on. And I started to do a handful of things, which I think would be helpful for other folks. And like, there's 6 things essentially that I try and do every day. And sometimes I only, like the majority of days I only do like 4 of them, but I was trying to track like, you know, what are the things that if I did it on a regular basis would improve my mood, and would really kind of like trickle through the rest of the day, whether it's mood, anxiety, uncertainty, things like that, that are at a super high level right now. And so those 6 things that I try to do are the first one is, when I wake up in the morning, I take a cold shower. And some people, you know, might not.
Well, that's good. That's
want
great.
to do that, yeah. But like, you know, I essentially crank up the heat to as high as it can go, and kind of sit in the shower, like a super hot shower for a little while, and then switch it to like as cold as it'll go, actually take the shower and then get out. But I think that for me, there's like other health benefits there as well. But for me, the big thing there is like kind of just getting over the mental hurdle of like, my body never wants to do that in the morning, but like making the decision to kind of do something that you don't necessarily want to do, and kind of saying, you know, to your mind and body, like, you know, I kind of call the shots here. You know, for me at least, sets me up for a good day. And then immediately when I get out of the shower, you know, you sometimes don't even need coffee because, you know, it'll wake you up, your nervous system, but is making the bed first thing in the day. So first thing I do, come out, and the first thing that's right there is the bed. Make the bed. If you do nothing else for the rest of the day, I think it was William McRaven at the Texas University of Texas commencement speech in 2014. He like, you know, said, you need an anchor point for your day, and sometimes that anchor can be as simple as making your bed. So even if you do nothing else for the rest of the day, at least you did one thing, and that can remind you there. Another thing that I've been trying to do, which, you know, with little kids is a lot harder, but is meditate. Try and just like take 10 minutes, even if it's just like sitting in the car for 10 minutes and breathing just by myself or outside. I think that like taking that time to yourself, and I think that especially as if people are with other people in wherever they are now, you don't really get that time to yourself. And I think that was, whether that was like your commute time in the past or your gym time or something like that, just making sure that you're kind of actively, consciously taking that sort of time. And there's a bunch of apps like Headspace and Calm and Waking Up are all 3 apps that you can try. And then I've been, you know, exercising to the best of my ability. We have a couple dumbbells here, but we've been doing the like Peloton workouts in the morning. And even if it's just like 10 minutes, or if you do like 10 push-ups every day or 10 arm curls or whatever it is, just like doing something that gets your heart rate up, you know, is important. I know I started to run outside again. I hadn't ran outside in years, probably since I moved, like I was living in Green Lake, which was over 7 years ago. And so I started doing that again, which I've kind of fallen back in love with. But with that as well, like the Peloton app, I think I think there's a free trial right now, but you can download apps like the 7-minute workout is one that is free, and obviously only takes 7 minutes and gives you a good body workout. You can download it on your phone, but that's been helpful for me. And then the last 2 are writing and reading. So I try every day to write 2 pages of something. So one thing that I found that was really cool is I think it was Penn Jillette. I was listening to a podcast, and he said that he writes a journal every day of like who he talked to, what he did, you know, if he created or learned anything, what he was thinking about, what's on his mind, things like that. What you're grateful for, I think, is also very good to throw in there. And the cool thing about that is if you do that now, especially, right? Like now, you know, you might not even remember what you were thinking or what you were doing a year from now, but to be able to look back and be like, oh, I connected with Tom on this Tuesday, and then that can serve as a reminder. If you do it for a year, you can look back, okay, last year on April 9th, I talked to Tom and I haven't talked to him in 3 months. Let me just reach out to him and shoot him a message and say, oh, hey, remember when? And it gives you kind of that ability to kind of put your thoughts on paper and maybe reduce a little bit of that mental anxiety. And then B, it's a great thing to look back on, in the future to say, okay, look how far we've come. Maybe we're back at work now. Maybe we're outside. And for me with little kids, you could kind of draw back on that and say, here's kind of what we were doing on a daily basis during that time. And then trying to read as much as I can. A couple great books that I read recently that are super easy reads are both by Stephen Pressfield, and they are The War of Art and Turning Pro. And you could finish both of those in like a day, but they are fantastic books that I wish I would have read a long time ago, and I think would be helpful for anybody regardless of kind of what they do for their jobs. Just a great kind of like little playbook that you can read very quickly and over again.
I think what you're saying, a lot of this is huge. And again, I hope people are getting something out of this, not only hearing your routine, but I think especially when people are inside, people are going stir crazy and people's structures, daily structures are going out the window. So they're not showering, they're not shaving, they're not, eating right, they're going to bed late, they're going to bed. I'm not saying you can't do that, but I'm saying, have some sort of routine, like you said, an anchor. It can be as simple as making your bed or showering each day or having good meals or going to bed at a set time or waking up at a set time. So you really do have structure and really try to promote something new and a new skill. So Jerry Seinfeld does the same thing. He's been in comedy for 40 some odd years, and he writes every single day on a yellow piece of paper, jokes or whatever, but to keep your skills and your abilities up. They say starting a new habit will take anywhere from 24 to 30 days. Well, we have that. So why don't you try to start a new habit? It could be as simple as push-ups, sit-ups, reading, journaling, meditating. It doesn't matter. You don't have to take what we're saying, but maybe there's something else that you like. Maybe it's needlepoint. Maybe it's something else. Go on your TV, YouTube something, how to do something else. Learn how to X. I think it's a great opportunity for us to learn something new and then to take it with us going forward. So I hope people aren't doing certain routines today, and as soon as everyone gets busy, they just blow everything up. I hope people get this into their unconscious and they start doing it every day. So it could be a morning routine, it could be reading, it could be journaling, it could be doing things. I know life becomes very hectic, but I think what we can learn is we can all etch out 10, 15 minutes a day. Obviously, like you said, when we do commutes and stuff later, we can listen to podcasts or we could do certain things. But I think what a lot of people have done is we're so busy, but we're not connecting as much. So this is a great time to connect. I've read two articles from China that the divorce rate is going up because a lot of people are stuck inside, but then the pregnancy rate is also going up. So there's a yin and a yang to everything, and it's all about mental mindset, how you want to take this. It could be woe is me, and you can watch everything under the moon on Netflix. I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's just what it is. Or you can etch in saying, you know what, I will still watch Netflix, but I will take 2 hours a day of being productive to do X, Y, and Z. Maybe that's your health, maybe that's reading, maybe that's reaching out to a friend. But I think during this time, it'd be a great time to think of, okay, what habit can I develop so it'll go with me outside of this time period? And then maybe also, is there something you could discipline yourself so maybe you can give up? If you're smoking or drinking or doing something else that maybe gets in your way sometimes, or something that you don't want to do, maybe it's not developing a new habit, but maybe it's extracting an old one. So
yeah, and I think that one big thing there is obviously those are the things that work for me, but just taking some time, whether you write it down or whether you just think about it during your day and just saying okay, over the last day or over the last week or whatever it was, doing what made me feel the most energized or engaged, and just kind of taking, whether it's mental track or writing that down, in order to say like, okay, here's some things that I know that kind of really light me up. And that if I just do that for a little bit during the day, it's going to make me that much more happy or productive or whatever it is. But just taking that time to just say like, okay, what is it that really does do that for me? And then just trying to see, like you were saying, building that in so that once we do get through this, that you can kind of continue and carry that on.
No, that's fantastic. So I see that we're about 47 minutes in, and I don't want to go much longer than this. And I thank you so much for your time. Is there anything that you would like to say to fathers like yourself or people living out there? Is there anything you'd like to kind of get across to anyone, or family or friends? And I don't know if there's anything you want to promote or talk about. Please, this is a very informal conversation, but I also want you to leverage, whatever's going on in your life. This is a great forum to do it.
Yeah, I think that I heard something the other day that I think is super helpful, because I know myself, like I was getting kind of anxious, or, people don't really know how they should be going about their daily life or things like that. And I think that like just knowing that like everybody, legitimately every single other person in the world is going through the like uncertainty, and nobody really has the right answer of how to approach this. And so we're kind of all in the same boat, just kind of anchoring yourself and remembering that like nobody has this figured out. Like just because you feel uncertain, you're not alone. And that a lot of other people are dealing with this kind of new craziness. But that, I think one of the big things that I keep telling myself is that if I can get through this super challenging time where, I'm watching kids and I'm trying to be productive and I'm trying to learn new things, if you can do that during this time, then the potential for you to kind of take that and explode once this is all over is huge. And so just kind of using that as a mindset of saying like, okay, it's super challenging. Things can be scary out there. But how can I use kind of this challenge as an opportunity to grow either mentally or in skill sets or things like that, I think is, especially when you have little kids around, is definitely important. And then to your point, like building skills, I have been like reading a bunch and am starting to write now. So if you go to kylethomas.blog, I just started a blog. I just posted my first post, I think it was yesterday, legitimately about those 6 things that I'm doing on a daily basis. And I'm going to try and push out at least one piece of content every week in order to kind of share things that I've learned, whether it's from my work in the startup world at Uber, or folks that I know in New York City, or working professionals who are kind of at the top of where they are, or books I've read, interesting things I've heard or listened to, just kind of trying to share the wealth there and hopefully provide some useful tidbit of information that folks can use in their day-to-day lives.
Okay, so again, what your blog address was?
kylethomas.blog.
Okay. And if anyone's going through, I know a lot of people are out of work. I know a lot of people are getting cut back on hours, or a lot of people might feel stuck. I know a lot of businesses out there, if they're sole proprietors and they don't have a business partner or someone to talk to, these can be hard times. I want to put myself out there where I do coaching for high performance individuals, and I also do business strategies and also work with the mindsets. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can look at my name. It's just tommatsell.com is my website if you want to reach out to me, or if you want to DM me. I definitely would talk to anyone who needs to understand more about the loan process, or maybe how to pivot in life on a personal level or business level. But I think if we can all just be there for each other, I'm not asking one person to donate a ton of money or give their whole day, but if everyone could give just about 10% of your time, effort, or energy, that will make a huge difference for other people. So I want to make myself available. So if someone needs to talk or understand something or see something in a different space because they're probably not in a good area, I definitely want to make myself available. So Kyle, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. It was great catching up with you a couple weeks ago and doing this. And thank you so much for that. And for everyone listening, thank you very much. My next New Now episode will be on Saturday. I have Dr. John Byrne, who is actually a university teacher from Iowa. So we're just trying to go to different parts of the country and talk to different people. But I will get that out, and we will be on Saturday. But Kyle, thank you very much. Stay safe. And I don't know if you could see right now, but I'm looking at the lovely mountains. I'm looking at Mount Rainier, and it's nice and sunny in Seattle.
Love it. Yeah, it's kind of a Seattle-esque day, rainy and overcast here in New York. So I'll put myself there mentally.
All right. Well, thanks so much. You take care. Be well, my friend.
Bye.